Okay, so let's get started. For this project, we're going to create a traffic cone or a construction cone. These are those things that you see on the side of the road all the time, usually orange in color, so you can identify them pretty quickly. It's a pretty simple object. It's really just, again, kind of a cone with a square base. There's not a lot to it, but what's interesting about it is it will expose us to a couple of the tools and different features that we'll use all of the time when modeling objects. So it's a pretty good thing to start with here. I'm going to go up to Create Polygon Primitives, and we're going to start with a cylinder, not a cone, as you might think. That might be easier, but it's actually easier to start with a cylinder here. And we'll grab our polycylinder, and I'm going to take the subdivision axes down to 8. It starts off at 20. That's a little too high. I want to keep things at a minimum always. No matter what I'm modeling, I want to start with a very low amount of geometry. Okay, I'm going to right mouse click and choose from that marking menu, Vertex, and then I'll select the top vertices, all of the vertices there, from the cylinder, and I'm going to hit R to go to my scale tool, and we'll grab the middle cube, which right now is highlighted yellow, and we'll uniformly scale that down to be the top of our cone. I'm going to right click again and go to Vertex to grab vertices from that marking menu, and then I'll left click, draw a marquee to select all of the vertices from the bottom of the cone, and I'll hit W and we'll translate that down a little bit, and I'm going to switch to a front view, and I'll hold X, and we'll snap that to a couple of grid units down. We're 3 grid units down there and 1 grid unit above our center line or our XZ plane. Okay, so now that gives us the basis for our cone, and let's go back to our perspective view. And now that grid is kind of getting in the way, so I'm going to go up in my menu bar up at the top and within my perspective window and just turn that off. And let's go to object mode so we can see this here without all those components. Okay, pretty good base start. Again, nothing too complex there, just working with our primitive. Now I want to select the base here, and I'm going to extrude some geometry out in order to create the square base that this cone usually sits on. To do that, I'm not going to select the faces. We have a little bit easier path. We have multiple ways that we could select these faces, so we'll look at a few here. But I'm just going to go to Vertex. My vertices are already selected because we translated these down before. And I'll right click, I'll hold Control, right click, and go to faces, and then go up to 2 contained faces. Okay, and that will then give me the proper selection. Now there's a couple of other ways we could have done that, and again, this is all about speed. We're saving seconds, maybe even milliseconds here. But another thing we could do, let's say we wanted to go the face route. So if I use my marking menu and choose face, I could just draw a marquee, and I call this a sloppy marquee, okay, because I didn't get really what I wanted to select. I got a bunch more there. All I really want is the bottom faces. So what I'll do is then hold Control and draw a marquee to deselect all those other faces that I didn't want. As you become more comfortable with the tools, you'll be able to do that really quick and be able to identify which method is going to work best. Okay, so again, if I just do that and that, boom, I've got my bottom faces selected there really quick. So now I'm going to go to Edit Mesh, go down to Face, and choose Extrude. Okay, now this gives me my Extrude tool, and I'm going to give it some thickness. I'm going to hold Control, and actually I won't hold Control at first, but let's just middle click on the word thickness. Okay, and then I'll scroll left to right. Okay, and you can see that it's pulling that down. I'm getting a pretty good extrusion there, but maybe it's going too fast for you to settle in on a value. So if you hold Control and then middle mouse on thickness, you'll see that the increment goes down to a 100th, as opposed to just the 10th there. And then we can kind of get a better feel for where this should go and the overall thickness. I'm thinking we'll set this to, we'll use 0.15. All right, now we need to extrude this again. So I'm going to select a single face, hold Shift, double-click the face next to it. And that will give me an edge loop. So now with that loop, I can then extrude out in order to get the base that the cone will sit on. Okay, now I could go back up to Edit Mesh and choose Extrude, but since it was the command that I used last, we could also hold Spacebar and go to Recent Commands and choose Poly Extrude Faces. Okay, or even faster, I can hit G on the keyboard, and that will repeat that last command. And then we could use our thickness to pull that out. Okay, so again, that's G. G is in Go. And if I hold Control, we can then pull that thickness out, okay, in smaller increments. I'm going to go with 0.6. I think that looks pretty good. Okay, now that gives me, we'll just deselect that just by clicking into empty space there, but now that gives me a round base. Okay, I don't want a round base, I want a square base. That'll help keep this cone flat to the ground a little bit better. So let's switch over to our top view, and I'm going to right mouse click, go to Vertex, and I will select the top two corners first. The order is not going to matter, but I'm going to select that top there, and I'm going to hold V as in Victor, and this will convert my selection here to snap to point. And I just want to then click on the Z axis, and you can see it highlights. I'll click on that and drag, and I'm going to drag to the point that I want my other points to be level with or to snap to. Okay, so now those points are actually snapping to that vertice that's in the center, but they're only being snapped in the Z axis. Okay, so we've restricted that. Next, we'll do the same thing for the bottom ones here. I'm going to hold V, grab the Z, and snap that down. And let's do it again, but now we're going to do it on the sides, and this means that we need to switch our axes. Instead of the Z, we're going to use the X. Snap that. And snap that. All right, there we go. So now we have a nice square base there, and we pretty much have a low resolution, a low polygon version of our traffic cone. Okay, and I'm going to switch back to object mode. Now, we could stop here, but we want this to look a little bit better. So in our next project lesson, we're going to look at how to get this to be a high resolution traffic cone.